What if the very people sworn to protect and serve had a hidden agenda? What if an innocent black man was brutally mistreated by racist cops, only for them to realize, too late, that they had just declared war on a man far deadlier than they could ever imagine? Meet Marcus Carter. To them, he was just another black man they could beat, humiliate, and throw away without consequences. But what they didn't know, Marcus wasn't just any man, he was a ghost. A warrior forged in the fires of war. A former Tier 1 operative with a military history so deadly, it was classified at the highest levels. Now, the hunters have become the hunted. And when Marcus fights back, the entire city is about to feel the heat. Do you think these corrupt cops will survive the storm they just unleashed? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget, like, subscribe, and share for more gripping stories like this. Because trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. The night air carried the scent of gasoline and the distant hum of a city that never truly slept. In the heart of a small town outside Atlanta, a black Dodge Charger rolled slowly to a stop at a dimly lit intersection. Behind the wheel sat Marcus Kane, a man of quiet intensity, his broad shoulders filling the driver's seat. His deep brown eyes flickered to the rearview mirror as red and blue lights flared behind him. A sigh escaped his lips. Another traffic stop. He had been through this before. Too many times. He pulled over, cutting the engine, resting both hands on the steering wheel, just as he had been trained to do. But he wasn't just any man. He was a former Marine Raider, a special operations force trained in unconventional warfare, counterterrorism, and close-quarters combat. Years of service overseas had taught him patience, discipline, and, most importantly, when to fight. Heavy boots crunched against the asphalt as two officers approached. One tapped the butt of his flashlight against the driver's side window. Marcus rolled it down smoothly. License and registration, the officer barked. Marcus retrieved his wallet, moving slowly, deliberately. He had learned that sudden movements gave people like this an excuse. He handed over his documents. The officer snatched them, barely glancing at them before looking back down at Marcus. "What's a boy like you doing in a car like this?" Marcus felt a muscle in his jaw tighten. He had heard it before. But he kept his voice level. "Just heading home." The second officer circled the Charger, his hand resting on his holster. "Step out of the vehicle." Marcus arched a brow. "What for?" The first officer, a tall man with a thick mustache, leaned in, sneering. "Because I said so." Marcus clenched his fists, but he complied. He had fought terrorists, warlords, and insurgents. He knew how to pick his battles. He stepped out, towering over both officers, his military-honed physique evident even beneath his hoodie. The second officer, a younger man with pale skin and a cocky smirk, took a step back but quickly recovered. "Turn around." "Hands on the car." Marcus exhaled sharply. "I haven't done anything." The mustached officer grabbed his wrist roughly. "I don't like your tone, boy." The word sliced through the air like a whip. Marcus's fingers twitched. His instincts screamed to act, to defend, but he forced himself to stay still. Then came the shove. Marcus slammed against the Charger, his cheek pressed to the cold metal. His pulse hammered in his ears as the second officer patted him down, his hands lingering longer than necessary. "Found something," the young officer said, yanking a pocket knife from Marcus's jeans. Marcus swallowed a laugh. A pocket knife. That's what they were going to use, carrying a concealed weapon, the mustached officer muttered. "That's a charge." Marcus turned his head slightly. "That's a legal knife." A fist struck his ribs, knocking the air from his lungs. He grunted, pain flaring across his side. "Shut the hell up," the younger officer spat. Marcus steadied his breathing. They were testing him, pushing him, waiting for him to react. But he wouldn't. Not yet. A police SUV pulled up behind them, and two more officers stepped out. One was a stocky man with a buzz cut, the other a wiry figure with cold eyes. "What we got here?" Buzzcut asked, smirking. "Just another thug," Mustache replied. Marcus's fingers curled into fists against the hood of his car. "Looks military," Cold Eyes observed, tilting his head. The other officers exchanged glances, then laughed. "Even better," Buzzcut chuckled. "They think they're tough until they're face down in the dirt." Marcus took a slow breath. He had endured worse. He had been captured once, deep in enemy territory. Beaten. Starved. Tortured. But even then, they hadn't broken him. Mustache reached for his belt and pulled out his baton. Resisting arrest is a serious offense. I'm not resisting, Marcus said through clenched teeth. That's so. Mustache grinned, then swung. The baton struck his ribs again, hard enough to make Marcus's knees buckle. A white-hot wave of pain exploded through his side. He saw it then, the glint of a badge, the smug expressions. The thrill in their eyes. They were enjoying this. Marcus pushed himself upright. The world around him slowed. He had been trained to assess, to calculate, to predict movements before they happened. He could take them down, all of them. In seconds, but not yet. Cold eyes grabbed his shoulder. Let's take this inside, see if he's still so tough without his fancy car. Marcus's jaw tensed. His mind raced. This wasn't just a traffic stop anymore. This was something else. Buzz Cut pulled out a pair of cuffs. Turn around. Marcus didn't move. A mistake. The younger officer struck first, a fist to the gut. Another baton strike landed across his back, his vision blurred for a moment. But he didn't go down. He had endured worse. They would regret this. Marcus let them push him toward their vehicle. He let them believe they had the upper hand, but deep inside, something dark stirred, something they weren't ready for, something that was coming. The back seat of the police SUV smelled like sweat, stale coffee, and cheap cologne. Marcus sat still, his wrists bound behind him, his muscles aching from the blows. The pain didn't matter. He had endured worse in war zones, behind enemy lines, under conditions these men couldn't even fathom. But what did matter was the rising anger boiling beneath his calm exterior. The four officers up front chuckled amongst themselves as the SUV rolled through the empty streets. You think he's got a record? The younger cop, Officer Denton, asked, smirking into the rearview mirror. Buzz Cut, who Marcus now knew as Officer Grady, let out a dry laugh. Oh, I'm sure of it. He looks the type. Marcus remained silent, staring straight ahead. Mustache, whose badge read Sergeant Crowley, turned in his seat, sneering. You ain't got nothing to say now, huh? Marcus met his eyes, cold and unflinching. Crowley's smirk faltered for a brief second before he turned back around. Yeah, that's what I thought, he muttered. The SUV pulled up to the back entrance of the police station, a small, aging building with flickering fluorescent lights above the door. The moment the vehicle stopped, the back doors swung open, and Grady yanked Marcus out by his arm. Move. Marcus stepped out, steadying himself. The cuffs bit into his wrists, but he ignored the sting. The night air was thick. Heavy with the scent of rain in the distance. Where you taking him? A new voice rang out. A female officer stood by the entrance, arms crossed. Her dark brown hair was tied into a tight bun, and her sharp eyes scanned the group suspiciously. Bringing him in for processing, Crowley said smoothly. She frowned. For what? Crowley's smirk returned. Resisting arrest. The woman's eyes flickered to Marcus. That true? Marcus remained silent. He had learned a long time ago that speaking wouldn't change anything. The officer hesitated but eventually stepped aside, shaking her head. They led him inside, past rows of empty desks and flickering monitors. The station was mostly deserted at this hour. Save for a few officers milling about, Marcus was shoved into a holding room, a small, gray space with a metal table and 2 chairs. The door slammed shut behind him. For the first time since the stop, Marcus exhaled deeply, closing his eyes for a brief second. He ran through his options. He could break free now, but that would cause more problems. He had to wait. He had to let them make the first mistake. Minutes passed. Then the door creaked open. Crowley and Grady stepped inside, but they weren't alone. A 5th man entered, a broad, heavy-set figure with slick-back gray hair. His uniform was crisp, the nameplate on his chest reading Captain Rawlings. Marcus knew his type. Old school, full of himself, the kind of man who had built his career on intimidation. Rawlings pulled out the chair across from Marcus and sat down, folding his hands on the table. You got a name? Marcus didn't answer. Rawlings smirked. That's fine. We already got your ID. He leaned back. Marcus Kane. That ring any bells? The room fell silent. Rawlings sighed, then turned to Crowley. You boys really know how to pick M. Crowley frowned. Sir. Rawlings shook his head. You brought in Marcus Kane. Yeah. And? Rawlings studied Marcus for a long moment before letting out a slow chuckle. You have no idea what you've done. Grady folded his arms. Just another punk off the streets. Rawlings' laughter faded. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. Marcus Kane isn't just some punk, Crowley's smirk wavered. Then what is he? Rawlings didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out his phone, typing something. A few moments later, a notification dinged, and his expression darkened. He looked at Marcus again, his amusement completely gone, then, without warning, Rawlings stood up. Uncuff him. Crowley's mouth fell open. What? You heard me. Uncuff him. Grady's brows knitted together. Sir, this guy resisted, did I stutter? Rawlings snapped, hesitation rippled through the room, but eventually, Crowley stepped forward, grumbling under his breath as he pulled out a key. He undid the cuffs with a sharp click. Marcus rolled his wrists, the tension easing slightly. Rawlings met his gaze. You can go. Crowley's face twisted in rage. The hell he can. We just brought him in, Rawlings spun on him, eyes burning. And now you're letting him go. The air in the room thickened with tension. Marcus stood slowly, towering over them all. He took his time stretching, the controlled movements making the officers uneasy. Crowley's fingers twitched toward his baton. This is some bullshit. Marcus moved. Before anyone could react, his hand shot out, gripping Crowley's wrist with crushing force. A sickening crack echoed in the room as Crowley let out a strangled yell. Dropping the baton, Grady lunged, but Marcus twisted, driving an elbow into his gut. The officer crumpled, gasping for air. Rawlings took a step back, hands raised. That's enough. Marcus stood tall, his gaze cold and unreadable. I don't take orders from you. Rawlings swallowed hard. I know who you are. Marcus smirked. Do you? Rawlings nodded slowly. Marine Raider. Special Forces. Served in classified operations. You're not someone we should have messed with. Marcus tilted his head. You're damn right. Crowley groaned from the floor, clutching his wrist. This ain't over. Marcus stepped over him, heading for the door. It was over the second you put your hands on me. Rawlings didn't try to stop him. Marcus walked out of the room, his mind already calculating his next move. These men weren't just corrupt. They were stupid. And that made them dangerous. He wasn't done yet. Marcus stepped into the dimly lit hallway, his muscles still tense from the brief but decisive altercation. The station was eerily quiet, with only the hum of fluorescent lights and distant murmurs from other rooms. He walked with measured steps, his mind sharp, analyzing every potential exit and threat. The front doors were too risky. The last thing he needed was more officers blocking his way. Instead, he veered left, heading toward a side corridor that led to an emergency exit. Just as he reached for the door handle, a voice cut through the silence. Where do you think you're going? Marcus turned slowly, finding himself face to face with Officer Denton, the younger cop who had been mocking him earlier. Denton's hand rested on the grip of his holstered Glock, his knuckles white. Marcus didn't answer. He simply stared, his unreadable expression making Denton shift uncomfortably. I don't know what kind of deal you made with the captain, Denton said, but you're not walking out of here like nothing happened. Marcus took a slow step forward. Move. Denton's jaw clenched. Or what? The air between them crackled with tension. Marcus could see the indecision in Denton's eyes. The young cop wanted to prove himself, to show he wasn't intimidated. But he also wasn't stupid. He had seen what Marcus had done to Crowley and Grady. Move, Marcus repeated, his voice lower, deadlier. Denton hesitated, then cursed under his breath and stepped aside. Marcus pushed open the emergency exit and stepped out into the night. The air was crisp, the scent of rain stronger now. He scanned the dark alley behind the station, his instincts on high alert. Something wasn't right. A shadow moved near the far end of the alley. Marcus turned just in time to see three figures step out from behind a dumpster, their silhouettes barely visible under the flickering streetlight. Two of them were cops, Grady and Crowley, looking furious and itching for payback. But the third man wasn't in uniform. He was dressed in black tactical gear, his face partially concealed by a ski mask. Marcus recognized the stance, the way the man held himself. This wasn't just some random thug. This was a professional, and he was holding an MP5 submachine gun. Marcus didn't hesitate. His body moved before his mind could process the full danger. The moment the gunman raised his weapon, Marcus was already diving to the side. Brap, a burst of gunfire shattered the night, rounds chewing into the brick wall where Marcus had been standing. He rolled behind a stack of wooden crates, his heart pounding but his mind laser-focused. Grady's voice rang out. "That's right, tough guy. You think you can put your hands on a cop and walk away?" Crowley laughed. "Not so fun when the guns are pointed at you." "Huh." Marcus pressed his back against the crates, calculating. He was outnumbered and outgunned. But he had been in worse situations before. He needed a weapon. His eyes flicked to a fallen police baton lying a few feet away on the ground. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Another burst of gunfire tore through the crates, sending splinters flying. Marcus knew he had seconds to move. He exploded into action, lunging forward, grabbing the baton, and rolling just as another burst of bullets shredded the ground behind him. Grady swore. "Stop moving, you son of a..." Marcus didn't let him finish. He moved fast, sprinting toward the nearest threat, Crowley. The cop barely had time to react before Marcus swung the baton with brutal force, cracking it against his knee. Crowley screamed, collapsing onto the pavement. Grady raised his pistol, but Marcus was already on him. He twisted the cop's arm, forcing him to fire wildly into the air before slamming an elbow into his throat. Grady choked, dropping to his knees. Now only one remained, the gunman. The man in tactical gear took a step back, reassessing. He wasn't a fool. He had seen Marcus move, seen how quickly he had dismantled the others. The man raised his MP5 again, but Marcus was faster. He closed the distance in a heartbeat, slamming the baton into the man's wrist. The submachine gun clattered to the ground. Marcus didn't let him recover. He spun, driving his knee into the man's ribs before grabbing him by the collar and slamming him face-first into the alley wall. The man groaned, dazed. Marcus pressed his forearm against his throat, pinning him. "Who sent you?" Marcus growled. The man coughed but didn't answer. Marcus tightened his grip. "Who sent you?" The man wheezed, struggling. Then, to Marcus's surprise, he chuckled. "You're already dead," he rasped. Marcus frowned. Then he heard it, the distant sound of sirens. Lots of them. The bastard had backup. Marcus released the man, letting him slump to the ground. He snatched up the MP5, checked the magazine, half full, and turned toward the end of the alley. Flashing red and blue lights appeared in the distance, rapidly closing in. Time to go. Marcus sprinted toward the opposite end of the alley, his mind racing. The city was waking up. The cops would be looking for him now, but they had no idea who they were really hunting. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Marcus ran through the alley, gripping the MP5 tightly. He had no time to waste. The sirens were growing louder, the police response closing in fast. He needed an escape plan. Now, the alleyway opened into a back street lined with rundown buildings. His eyes darted left and right, assessing his options. Running straight into open streets was suicide. He needed cover. A chain-link fence stood ahead, topped with barbed wire. It was his best option. Footsteps pounded behind him. He turned his head just enough to see Crowley limping after him, gun in hand. "Stop!" The officer yelled. Marcus didn't stop. Crowley fired. A bullet whizzed past Marcus's shoulder, sparking against the metal dumpster beside him. He pushed harder, leaping at the fence. His hands gripped the links, muscles straining as he pulled himself up. The barbed wire was inches away when, bang, a second shot rang out. This one hit home. Pain exploded in Marcus's side, but he didn't stop. He gritted his teeth, ignoring the burn as he flipped himself over the barbed wire and landed hard on the other side. He rolled, came up on one knee, and snapped the MP5 up. Crowley was already aiming for a third shot. Brap. Marcus squeezed the trigger, sending a short burst of 9mm rounds into the dumpster beside Crowley. The cop dove for cover, cursing. Marcus didn't wait to see if he'd try again. He sprinted down the street, keeping his left hand pressed to his side where the bullet had grazed him. The wound was shallow, but the pain was a sharp reminder that he wasn't invincible. He needed to get off the streets fast. His eyes locked onto a row of abandoned buildings ahead. One of them, a boarded-up auto shop, looked promising. Marcus kicked in the side door and slipped inside, his movements quick but controlled. the place was dark, smelling of rust and old oil. Broken cars and scattered tools littered the space. Perfect. He moved deeper inside, finding a corner near a workbench where he could catch his breath. His mind raced. The cops weren't just looking for him anymore. They were hunting him. And now that blood had been spilled, they wouldn't stop until they had him in cuffs, or in a body bag. A normal man would be panicking, but Marcus wasn't a normal man. His instincts, honed from years of military service, were already forming a counterattack. He checked the MP5, 18 rounds left. Not enough for a prolonged firefight. He needed more firepower. A sound outside made him freeze. Car doors slamming, radios crackling. They had found him. Marcus inhaled deeply, centering himself. He wasn't about to let these bastards take him down. A flashlight beam cut through the cracks in the boarded windows. Shadows moved outside, then, bang, the front door burst open. Police. Hands in the air. 3 officers stormed inside, guns drawn. Marcus was already in motion. He dived behind a rusted car as bullets tore through the air, shattering glass and punching into metal. Rolling to the side, he peeked out and fired a controlled burst. Brap, one officer screamed as the rounds clipped his shoulder, sending him spinning to the ground. The other 2 dove for cover, returning fire. Marcus stayed low, moving fast. He ducked behind a tool chest, reloading with the last magazine he had. One of the cops shouted, "Surrender, you son of a..." Marcus wasn't listening. He grabbed a wrench off the floor and hurled it toward a stack of oil cans. The loud clang made the officers instinctively turn their heads. Marcus sprang from cover, sprinting forward. Before the nearest officer could react, Marcus slammed the butt of his MP5 into his jaw, knocking him cold. The last cop spun toward him. Too slow. Marcus grabbed the man's wrist, twisted hard, and wrenched the gun from his hand. A brutal elbow strike to the temple put him down. Silence. 3 cops lay sprawled across the shop floor, groaning in pain or unconscious. Marcus exhaled, scanning for more threats. The distant sirens told him he had maybe a minute before reinforcements arrived. No time to celebrate. He crouched, grabbing the fallen officer's Glock and extra magazines. Better than an empty MP5, his escape route was through the back. He rushed to the exit, but as he reached for the handle, the door exploded inward. A figure charged in, tackling Marcus with brutal force. They crashed to the ground, rolling across the concrete. Marcus recovered first, kicking his attacker off. He scrambled to his feet, just as his opponent did the same. It was the man in tactical gear, the one who had tried to kill him in the alley. The man grinned, wiping blood from his lip. "Didn't think I'd find you so fast, did you?" Marcus didn't answer. He simply raised his stolen Glock. The man moved like lightning. He swatted the gun aside and drove a fist into Marcus's ribs. Pain flared, but Marcus countered instantly, smashing a knee into the man's stomach. They went at it, fists flying in a brutal, high-speed exchange. The man was good. Trained. Probably ex-military, but Marcus was better. He caught the man's wrist mid-punch, twisted hard, and sent him crashing into a workbench. Before the man could recover, Marcus grabbed a heavy metal pipe and swung. The pipe connected with the man's side. He grunted, stumbling. Marcus didn't let up. He swung again. The man barely dodged, but it was clear, he was losing. "You don't know who you're messing with," the man spat, blood dripping from his mouth. Marcus's eyes were cold. "Neither do you." With one final swing, he sent the man crashing to the floor, unconscious. The sirens were nearly on top of him now. Time to disappear. Marcus sprinted out the back door into the darkness. This wasn't over, not even close. Marcus moved like a shadow through the back alley, his muscles burning from the fight. He kept his grip tight on the stolen Glock, his mind working fast. He needed to disappear. Now, the auto shop was compromised. More cops were coming. If they boxed him in, there'd be no escape. A chain of abandoned warehouses loomed ahead, their rusted doors barely hanging on. He sprinted toward them, dodging between dumpsters and wrecked cars. Behind him, the chaos erupted. More sirens, radios crackling, shouts. They found him. "Move in." Flashlights swept through the darkness as officers fanned out. Marcus ducked behind a stack of pallets, heart steady, mind razor sharp. 2 cops rushed past his hiding spot. Weapons raised. "Did you see where he went?" One of them panted. "He's close." He couldn't have gone far. Marcus exhaled slowly. They had no idea how close he was. He moved fast. Silent. In a flash, he grabbed the nearest officer from behind, wrapping an arm around his throat. the cop choked, struggling, but Marcus squeezed harder, cutting off his air. The man's gun clattered to the pavement as his body went limp. The second officer spun around. Marcus yanked the unconscious cop's sidearm and fired. 2 perfect shots. The officer dropped, his leg buckling as he screamed in pain. Marcus didn't hesitate. He snatched up a radio from the downed cop's vest and slipped away before backup arrived. He needed information, and this radio was his key. Pressing a button, he tuned in. A voice crackled through. "This is Echo Unit. Suspect last seen near the auto shop. Units move in from the north and south. He's armed and extremely dangerous." Marcus smirked. They were moving in the wrong direction. Good. He ducked into one of the abandoned warehouses, scanning for supplies. A metal ladder led to a second-floor catwalk. He climbed swiftly, his boots silent on the rungs. From above, he had a clear view of the approaching cops, tactical teams, heavy armor, night vision. They weren't taking any chances. Marcus rolled his shoulders. If they wanted a fight, he'd give them one. He scouted the warehouse. Rusted chains hung from the ceiling. A stack of wooden crates stood near a broken window. He had an idea. Grabbing a length of chain, he fastened it to one of the beams. Then he pried open a crate. Inside, jackpot, old construction explosives. Probably forgotten for years. He worked fast, rigging a makeshift trap. Then he waited. Minutes later, the first team breached the entrance. A flashbang exploded, flooding the room with white light. Then they stormed in, 6 men. Heavily armed, clear left. Clear right. Marcus crouched on the catwalk, unseen. The lead officer moved toward the crates. Right into his trap, Marcus yanked the chain. Whoosh, the crates tumbled, knocking 2 officers off their feet. Before the others could react, Marcus fired. 3 perfect shots. 1 officer went down instantly. Another staggered, clutching his chest. The remaining 3 spun toward the catwalk, weapons raised. Marcus dove behind cover as bullets shredded the railing. He reached for the detonator. Time for a little chaos. He pressed the button. The explosives ignited, blasting debris across the warehouse. The shockwave sent the officers flying. Marcus moved fast. He leaped from the catwalk, landing in a roll. One of the officers groaned, struggling to rise. Marcus knocked him unconscious with a brutal strike. The last cop stumbled backward. Fumbling for his weapon, too slow, Marcus grabbed him by the vest and slammed him into a pillar. The cop gasped, eyes wide with fear. Marcus leaned in, his voice ice cold. "Who sent you?" The cop swallowed hard. We got orders. The chief wants you dead." Marcus's jaw tightened. This wasn't just a manhunt, someone wanted him gone. Permanently. He let the cop slump to the ground, unconscious. Then he took his radio, tuned it to the command frequency, and spoke. "This is Marcus Carter," he said, his voice calm. A stunned silence. Then, "You're a dead man," a voice growled. Marcus smirked. "We'll see about that." He tossed the radio aside and slipped into the night. This war was just beginning. Marcus moved swiftly through the shadows, his heart steady, his mind sharp. He had just wiped out a tactical team, but he knew the worst was yet to come. The cops weren't just after him, they wanted him dead. That meant one thing, they knew who he was. Somewhere, someone had figured out that Marcus Carter wasn't just an average man. He wasn't some street thug running from the law, he was a war machine, a former Tier 1 operator, a soldier trained in black ops missions, deep cover assignments, and unconventional warfare. They had picked the wrong man to hunt, but if they knew about his past, that meant they had his records. His history, which meant they had a real problem. Marcus wasn't just a veteran, he was classified. The things he had done, the operations he had completed, were sealed behind the highest levels of government security. If they had his files, that meant someone high up had leaked them, and that meant this went deeper than just a rogue group of racist cops. Marcus gritted his teeth as he weaved through the empty industrial district, his stolen Glock held low but ready. He needed answers, he needed to know who wanted him dead, and he had a plan to find out. A few miles away, the city's central police precinct was a fortress. High fences, security cameras, armed guards patrolling the perimeter. Breaking in wasn't going to be easy. Good, Marcus thrived on challenges. He scouted the area from a rooftop across the street, studying the layout. 2 guards at the front entrance. 4 on the perimeter. Cameras covering every angle. Most people would have called this impossible. Marcus saw opportunities. He timed the guard rotations, noting the blind spots between patrols. He needed a distraction. His eyes landed on a nearby power transformer. Perfect. Slipping down an alley, he found an old length of rebar and some wiring. A quick makeshift device later, he had a timed charge ready to go. He set it near the transformer and moved into position. 30 seconds later, the explosion ripped through the night, sending sparks and fire into the air. The power grid flickered, and in that moment of chaos, Marcus moved. He sprinted across the street, vaulted the security fence, and landed silently inside the compound. A guard rushed past, radio in hand. Marcus struck. A lightning-fast chokehold dropped the man before he could make a sound. Marcus grabbed his keycard and slipped inside the building. Inside, the station was chaos. Officers were scrambling, trying to figure out what had caused the explosion. Marcus moved like a ghost through the halls, staying in the shadows, avoiding the patrols. His destination was the evidence room. That's where they would keep his weapons, and more importantly, his files. The locked door wasn't a problem. One sharp elbow strike shattered the cheap security panel. A few wire adjustments later, the lock disengaged. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Rows of shelves filled the room, stacked with confiscated weapons, files, and personal effects. He moved fast, scanning labels. Then, his name, Marcus Carter. He yanked open the drawer and found a thick folder. He flipped it open, his eyes scanning the pages, and that's when he saw it, an official government seal, stamped with the words, "Classified, eyes only." Marcus's stomach tightened. The police had no business having this file. Who gave it to them? As he flipped the pages, his blood ran cold. There was an order, a direct order. It wasn't just an arrest warrant, it was an elimination order, signed by someone high up. This wasn't just about the cops anymore. Someone in the government wanted him erased. Before he could process it further, the door burst open. Freeze. 6 heavily armed officers stormed in, rifles raised. Marcus didn't hesitate. He grabbed a smoke grenade from a nearby evidence bin, pulled the pin, and threw it. Thick white smoke filled the room instantly. Chaos erupted. Marcus moved. He tackled the nearest officer, yanked the rifle from his hands, and slammed the butt into his face. Another officer fired blindly, missed. Marcus spun, disarmed him, and sent him crashing into a shelf. Bullets ripped through the smoke, but Marcus was already gone. He burst into the hallway, rifle in hand. Alarms blared. He sprinted toward the exit, weaving through officers. A cop tried to block him. Marcus shot out a knee, sending the man crashing down. He reached the back door and shouldered it open. Outside, floodlights snapped on. A SWAT truck skidded into the alley. Armed men pouring out. Marcus cursed. They were waiting for him. The odds were stacked against him, and he didn't care. Adrenaline surged through his veins. It was time to remind them who they were dealing with. Marcus raised his rifle and opened. His rifle spat death into the night, bullets cutting through the SWAT team before they could react. The first officer went down screaming, his vest absorbing some of the impact, but not enough. The second dropped his weapon, clutching his leg as crimson spread across his tactical pants. The rest dove for cover, returning fire. Marcus moved like lightning, rolling behind a dumpster as bullets ricocheted off the metal. He was outnumbered, outgunned, surrounded, and he didn't care. He reached into his vest, grabbing a flashbang from the stolen police gear. Click. 3, 2, 1. The alley exploded in white light and deafening noise. Marcus was already moving before the echo faded. He charged the SWAT truck, smashing the butt of his rifle into the nearest officer's jaw. Bone cracked, and the man collapsed like a rag doll. Another lunged at him. Too slow. Marcus spun, driving an elbow into his throat. The officer gagged, clutching his windpipe as he crumpled. 2 more raised their rifles. Marcus ducked, snatched a pistol from a fallen cop, and fired. Both officers staggered back, dropping to the ground. The last SWAT officer scrambled for cover, fumbling with his radio. Officer down. "We need." Marcus was on him in an instant. He grabbed the man's vest, ripped the radio from his hand, and slammed him against the SWAT truck. The officer's face twisted in fear. Please." He stammered. Marcus's voice was cold. "Who sent the kill order?" I don't know." The officer pleaded. "I swear. We just follow orders." Marcus pressed harder. "Who gave them?" The officer hesitated, then his radio crackled. A voice came through, a voice Marcus recognized. "Take him out. Now." Marcus's blood ran ice cold. He knew that voice, General Raymond Carter, his former commanding officer, his mentor, his brother. Marcus let go of the officer, his mind spinning. This wasn't just a manhunt, this was personal. Before he could process it, the wail of sirens filled the air. More units, more firepower. He had to go. Marcus turned and disappeared into the night. His mind set on one thing, finding Raymond Carter, and getting the truth. Wow. What a ride. Marcus Carter was just an innocent man, but those racist cops had no idea who they were messing with. And when they finally realized the truth, it was already too late, but the real question is, did they get what they deserved? Or do you think Marcus should have gone even further? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so you never miss another action-packed tale. More stories are on the way, and trust me, you don't want to miss them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.